I'm sorry.
Oh Nelly, was this a good one. What a good string of movies 2014 had in its final third. People have been saying that this is arguably the toughest Oscar season in years, and it's hard to deny when the competition includes films like Whiplash. It's kind of sad actually though, because Whiplash is one of the lowest grossing Best Picture nominees ever. Just on that alone, I would encourage everyone to go and see this movie because this truly is one of the better pictures of the year. And the thing that made it so good is just how simple it is. On a completely surface level, Whiplash is a film about drumming, but it's anchored by its two main characters and their chemistry. It's like the camera couldn't take its eyes off these two, and quite frankly, neither could I. The story follows Andrew Neiman, played by Miles Teller, and his time spent under the cruel tutelage of the almost infamously stern Terence Fletcher, played wonderfully by J.K. Simmons. Practically the entirety of the film zones in on the relationship of these two characters. Andrew attends the very prestigious fictitious music school Schaefer for the sole purpose that he wants to be the greatest jazz drummer ever. Once accepted by Fletcher into his band, we see that he operates on nothing but intimidation and the dehumanization of his students. Although, interestingly enough, the reason he treats Andrew this way is because he too wants him to become the best. I'm confident that the main thing that people will be talking about after they see this film are the characters, because 90% of the movie revolves around their interaction with one another. Andrew features in every single scene, and if Fletcher isn't in a scene, he has influenced it in one way or another. The film is about these two characters. Both Andrew and Fletcher are absolutely obsessed with their art to the point where anything less than perfection is worthless. Andrew is this very passive and introverted guy who is willing to put up with anything as long as it means a good end result, which is why scenes with him and Fletcher are so hair-tearingly stressful. Fletcher is a ruthless mentor, and you know exactly what his character is all about from the first moment he's on screen. He has zero boundaries when it comes to the treatment of his pupils. This is the kind of man that would have no qualms about putting someone in genuine danger if it meant that it made their playing just a modicum better. Think of the most strict teacher you ever had and multiply it tenfold. He's that intense. I'm going to say that I think J.K. Simmons deserves the Oscar for this because this is one of the most intimidating characters I've seen for a long time. No matter what the scene entails, you just know that he's in control, and Simmons captures this sense of authority really well. He already had this very defined facial structure which is fear-inducing in itself, but even his little idiosyncrasies are clear ways of showing us you do not fuck around with this guy. I loved how if someone messes up during his conducting, Fletcher has this move where he just clutches at the air and follows it with the most patronising line.
Not quite my tempo.
I've heard people compare Fletcher to Sergeant Hartman from Full Metal Jacket, and I really can't think of a closer comparison. The anxious feeling you get when he's on screen because you just know that something bad is going to happen very shortly. And the shit that comes out of this man's mouth had me giggling because some of these insults are some of the most hilariously disheartening things you could say to another person. The character did have massive potential to go too far and end up being a bit cartoony, but it never hit that point, and the film even did a good job of humanising him enough to see that this is in fact a real human being. But the one thing that I think pushes Fletcher into becoming a great character is because he is a character that has moulded himself a philosophy that's absolutely morally ambiguous, but it's understandable. The main question that the film raises is, can the greatest art only emerge through struggle and suffering? But more importantly, is it worth it? The argument in the film is set on a very level playing field, and I suppose ultimately it's entirely up to the audience to decide. I know that I've essentially just been analysing these characters for the crux of this review so far, but that's because these characters, their story and what they represent is everything that the film is about. As slim as the plot is, it does just enough with the few other plot threads that it has to deepen the character of Andrew. We see that he has a girlfriend as well as a family life to think about, but Whiplash tackles these subplots in a somewhat untraditional manner as to how you'd expect they'd be handled in similar films. It integrates them just enough to show the impact that Fletcher has on his personal life, but the film only touches on them and then they sort of fade away. This isn't because of poor filmmaking, it's just that our main character's mind is elsewhere and the film is shown from his perspective. Admittedly, I would have enjoyed it if they studied Andrew's personal life just a tiny bit more, but at the same time I get why they didn't. Structurally, it was still pretty flawless. I felt that Whiplash plays out more like a sports movie than a film about music. The physical demand that Andrew has to go through to reach what he deems satisfactory is so extreme, and it's like witnessing an athlete train for an Olympic event. The plot isn't about the journey to fame, it's not the rags to riches story. It's about our main character becoming the objective best. It's a film about a boy honing his skills, which is a pretty unique focal point for a story. However, the movie is so fierce in its depiction of someone chasing their dream that as an audience member, I felt exhausted just watching it. Andrew shed so much blood, sweat and tears, and whilst watching him, you do get a sense that this is someone who has been pushed far beyond their limit. But he does it all for his talent. He lives for his music. And sheed, if this soundtrack isn't great. This soundtrack is so good that I wanted to join a jazz troupe after coming out of this film, and I still do. It's just a complete celebration of the music that it's centered around, and it's filmed and edited with such pizzazz that it greatly complements the musical style. However, my biggest gripe with the film was in fact a technical issue. I know the bare basics about drums, but even I was able to spot continuity errors with the syncing of the drumming and what was being shown. Now, ordinarily stuff like this I let slide. Movies are difficult to make and continuity errors are bound to pop up at some point, but with Whiplash they happened a few too many times for me not to mention it. If you know where a snare is on a drum kit and what it sounds like, you may pick up on this too. Again, I don't normally get bogged down with minor technical faults, but this happened a bit too often, and when the issue is linked with the main focus of your film, I have to regard it as a negative in my eyes. But I will say that aside from that, the editing was very sharp and it suited this film wonderfully. There was a drum solo in here and I don't think you could have filmed and edited it any better because it really gets you excited. Admittedly, I did find it difficult to get across why I like this film because it relies entirely on the characters and it's only by watching them that you can understand why this is a great movie. Seriously, watching these two interact with one another is one of the most electrifying developments between characters that I have ever seen. The film builds to this dynamic tempo and it just explodes at the end in a brilliant climax. Honestly, the best way for you to get what I'm explaining is to just experience it for yourself, because I can't see anybody disliking this film. People may not like it as much as I do, but really, I don't know what is in here for people to dislike. There is no filler, the movie is constantly gripping all the way through, and all the performances are great. It's so basic, I wish I could have made it. If I had to summarise this movie, I would say that Whiplash is just a very well-made, exciting drama, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of people by just how good it is. And that's why I'm giving it a 9.